What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got a quicker video for you guys on a Monday morning here. I've got just my waiver wire pickups for Week 10 NFL action. Before I get into my pickups here, looking forward into the rest of the week, I've got a lot of trade-focused content for you guys for Week 10 because the trade deadline is rapidly approaching for many of your guys' leagues. The ESPN deadline, I believe, is the 21st of November. So I'm going to give you guys all the information you need to know regarding players that you should be trading for and trading off your team. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. That bell is on so you're notified whenever I come out with a new episode. Let's keep growing here as a community. Let's do it together, and let's win some fantasy championships. Without further ado, let's hit the intro and get into the waiver wire pickups for Week 10. We're going to start out this week's list with the quarterbacks. As always, Drew Lock is my first guy to go and pick up for your rosters this week. And he's a guy who, over the last couple of weeks, has really shown that he has value in fantasy this year. I actually projected Drew Lock to be a decent level player in fantasy. I think I had him around my QB 15 or so because of all those weapons he had coming into the season. But obviously, Courtland Sutton dealt with the injury. Obviously, Drew Lock was injured himself, so some minor setbacks for Drew Lock this season. But like I said, the last couple weeks, Drew Lock has been phenomenal. This week, 313 yards passing for 2 touchdowns and his second straight performance of 19-plus fantasy points. I think Drew Lock definitely has a role on some rosters the rest of the year. He's definitely a guy I would consider streaming against opponents who have a high-powered offense because when the Denver Broncos get into shootouts or when their defense can't quite hold up, Drew Lock's going to throw the football. He's going to go after those chunk plays. He likes to air it out. And like I said, he's going to commit turnovers, but Drew Lock is still fantasy relevant despite that. I think I've compared him in the past to a modern Jay Cutler. He just kind of slings it down the field. Big arm, a little bit careless at times, but he makes big plays happen. He can be amazing at times and dreadful at others. But Drew Lock is definitely a guy who holds fantasy relevance the rest of the 2020 season. My next guy up here who should be rostered in all leagues for teams looking for a dependable second quarterback option that can start on occasion is Kirk Cousins, the Minnesota Vikings starting QB. Kirk Cousins right now, his numbers are a little bit down, but he's being highly efficient when he throws the football. 3 passing touchdowns against Detroit in Week 9 for Cousins. And right now that offense is being completely carried by Dalvin Cook. And looking forward into the rest of the season, I see some very difficult matchups in the running game for the Vikings. So that means Kirk Cousins is going to have to air it out. Obviously, we know about Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. He's got Irv Smith who can make plays. And those running backs can make plays out of the backfield as well. So Kirk Cousins has a lot of fantasy potential. It's just right now the offensive game script is to run first. And when he's able to do that, his numbers in terms of passing attempts are going to go down a little bit. Into my waiver wire running backs list, Zack Moss is at the top of the list this week. Moss is still only owned in just a touch over 50% of ESPN fantasy leagues, and I think Zack Moss is starting to grasp the hold of that Bills offense in terms of being the lead back there. It's still a committee, and he's still not going to be an extremely high-volume guy, but I think Zack Moss is overtaking Devin Singletary a little bit in terms of fantasy value, especially in standard leagues. I think Singletary holds a little bit higher PPR value just because he is the receiver in that backfield, but Zack Moss, 11 total touches to Devin Singletary's minimal 5 this week against Seattle in a 44-point outing for that team. The Bills were great offensively, and Zack Moss didn't really rack up the yards on the ground, but he did get in the end zone for a touchdown. So I think Zack Moss, while his value is not super high, he is still a player you need on your rosters because he's going to get you touchdowns. He is that goal line back for the Bills. In standard leagues, it's not even a discussion. If Zack Moss is on the waivers, you guys need to go out and add him. And if you guys are in PPR leagues that are maybe a little bit deeper, 12 to 14-man leagues, go get Moss for your teams as well. Same deal here. Damien Harris made my list in Week 9, and he made the lists of a lot of other fantasy analysts last week. But yet, he's only owned in 56% of leagues, and that is terrible. This guy needs to be owned in every single standard league out there. He is the lead back for the Pats offense, and he is going to get the rock more than anyone else out of that backfield. This video is going up before the Monday Night Football game against the Jets, and I expect him to be highly involved. If you guys are looking for a streamer in that game and Damien Harris is available, go start him in your leagues. He's going to have a big game. I see 15 touches realistically for Harris with the upside of 20+. So Damien Harris, you guys need to go roster him. This guy is here to stay in the Pats backfield, and I like him more than any other player going forward the rest of the season for the New England Patriots offense. Something I don't think anyone saw coming this week was the amount of work Kalen Ballage was going to see for the Chargers offense. Justin Jackson was knocked out of the game early, and Tremaine Pope was not active for the game, and they actually deferred Joshua Kelly's carries to Kalen Ballage, who had 17 total touches for over 70 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. So Kalen Ballage clearly showed that he can get it done. He wasn't the most efficient player in the world or the most explosive guy, but very consistent. His average clip was pretty nice. I think Kalen Ballage, if he's looking at that load again next week, I think Austin Eckler and the time that he's going to be out for, I think provides some upside for Ballage here. So Kalen Ballage might be a nice stream for the next 1 to 2 weeks here, depending on who the Chargers are able to suit up in that backfield. I think if Justin Jackson is not able to go again next week because of that knee injury, I believe it was, that he sustained, Kalen Ballage is a guy you could look at in standard leagues as an RB2 or even a flex play. If I had to pick my favorite guy to play next week out of this group, it would be Duke Johnson Jr., the Texans running back, who actually stepped in this week for David Johnson, who was put in the concussion protocol after a big hit against the Jaguars. Duke Johnson is really dynamic, and he can give you guys a lot of value in your lineups. He can get it down on the ground and through the air. He's a very nice receiving threat, and that's probably what he's actually most well known for, but he can certainly run the football as well. He got in the end zone in Week 9, and I think that he's going to be highly involved in Week 10 if he is given the nod to start because of that concussion. So if David Johnson doesn't clear concussion protocol, Duke Johnson is a must-play for me. I really like his value trending up this week. Another injury that needs to be monitored this week is David Montgomery's of the Chicago Bears. If Montgomery isn't able to go in Week 10, Cordarrelle Patterson will be given the nod due to Tariq Cohen being on the IR and the fact that the Bears and other teams in the past few years have really liked handing the football off to him. Cordarrelle Patterson is a very tall, very physical guy. When he gets in open space, it's nasty. So Cordarrelle Patterson, I think, is another guy with really, really high upside due to what we've seen from him in the past out of the backfield. The one major concern here is that the Bears' run blocking has been atrocious this year. They haven't been able to block anybody, and that is certainly a concern. You can't really run anywhere if you have nowhere to run. So Cordarrelle Patterson, though, is worth the ad this week. If you're needy at the running back position, I think that he might actually be able to be played in the wide receiver spot on ESPN Fantasy. I'm not sure. Let me guys know in the comments if that is still true, but there's some positional matchups you're able to exploit. A couple years ago, I actually started 4 RBs in my lineup in a one-flex league because I had Ty Montgomery at wideout, and that was when he just made the position change, and they had not fixed that. So Patterson might have a similar situation. I'm not sure if ESPN has updated that, but Cordarrelle Patterson, go at him for Week 10. Now into my wide receiver section of the waiver wire video. Tim Patrick is a guy who I believe has made this list 2 or 3 times so far this season. He's a guy I've had stashed on my bench in a couple leagues, and he has produced really nice numbers. I've never actually needed to start him yet, but I would be completely comfortable doing so. I think this week against Atlanta was a fantastic option to give him that nod. But in the handful of games I've watched from the Broncos this year, particularly after the Courtland Sutton injury, Tim Patrick is getting looks from Drew Lock. He's getting looks in the end zone. He's getting looks down the field. And in the big moments in the game, he is going to Tim Patrick. So this is a guy I really like having on your teams. I think he definitely has value in fantasy and is criminally underrated. Only owned in 14% of fantasy leagues this year. Tim Patrick is definitely a guy who you can go out and add with all the injuries we've seen this season. As a Green Bay Packer fan, I am freaking pumped that Allen Lazard is coming back this week. Him and Rodgers were excellent so far this season when they've been on the field together. Only 3 games for Allen Lazard this year, but his last outing against New Orleans before his core muscle surgery, he was amazing. He absolutely torched those guys. He looked like Davante Adams when Davante Adams was not on the field for that game. So Allen Lazard, this guy is going to have a lot of value, only owned in 30% of ESPN leagues. So a lot of potential for him to be on your waiver wire, and you don't even know about it because he's technically still on the IR, so not projected any points. He's probably buried down there somewhere. Go find him. Go add him. He needs to be rostered in all leagues. I would say PPR, standard, it doesn't matter. If your league has at least 10 players, this guy deserves a roster spot, and he's a guy who can produce wide receiver 2 numbers the rest of the season. Another guy who needs to be rostered in all fantasy leagues of at least 10 players is Curtis Samuel, the Panthers wide receiver. He is very quickly becoming a very dynamic and explosive player in that Panthers offense, and Matt Rule is using him perfectly. I think he's turning into maybe the modern new day version of Randall Cobb. You actually see it here, I guess, on playerprofiler.com here. Randall Cobb is his comp. During the prime of his career, Randall Cobb was a very versatile player for that Green Bay Packers offense. They lined him up in the backfield. They split him out wide on the outside. They put him in the slot. They moved him all over the place. He was that gadget Swiss Army knife, and Curtis Samuel is showing that he has the potential to be that and even more, to be honest. Randall Cobb could never run like Curtis Samuel can, and this guy can stretch the field. He can do intermediate routes. He can run the football. He is so valuable on that lineup for the Panthers offense that he returns fantasy value as well. Over 100 yards from scrimmage this week and a touchdown. He needs to be rostered on all teams. Richie James is a guy whose job kind of fell in his lap due to injuries, so his value isn't going to be sustainable for a long period of time, but in the absence of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk last week, he was the number one wideout on that team, and I think he had 28 points in half PPR leagues, which is what the majority of my leagues are scored in. So San Fran also just cut Dante Pettis, so that's some other touches and targets freed up for him in that lineup, and Kendrick Bourne is out right now as well. So Richie James, only really a valuable player when those guys are out of the lineup. As soon as they come back, you can probably drop Richie James back to the waiver wire. But for now, he's worth the ad if you're needy at wideout. And then into the last segment here, the tight ends. Robert Tonyan is a guy you guys need to go pick up. Only owned in 56% of leagues, I believe. But he's a guy I've just been raving about here on the channel. I actually said to not play him last week because I knew Fred Warner would lock him down in the flats. And he is too good of a linebacker to let up those freebie plays that he's been getting. But Robert Tonyan this week against the Jags has a very favorable matchup. Not owned as much as he should be in leagues, and I think he's a guy that definitely has some upside this week. The Packers are probably going to put up a lot of points, so Robert Tonyan is a guy I would look at as a tight end streamer or a second tight end to roster on your bench in deeper leagues. And the last player on today's list is Jimmy Graham, the Bears tight end. Jimmy G is definitely a dependable guy in your lineups the rest of the season. He's had a couple down weeks in a row, but bounced back against Tennessee and got in the end zone for a score. He was in like triple coverage and went up and just made a high point jump ball over all the defenders. So obviously a guy Nick Foles trusts down in the red zone. Last week they were just kind of out of sync and their throws were off target, so they didn't connect as much as they would have liked. But Jimmy G back in the mix this week. He's definitely a guy who going forward has a floor of being a low-end tight end 1 and has mid to high-end tight end 1 potential and upside depending on how many times he's able to find the end zone. He's owned in a little bit more than the other guys on this list. I believe it's just over 60% of leagues. But if you're looking for a stream player, Jimmy Graham is a guy to go to. I've depended on him a couple times in lineups this season, and it's worked out very nicely. So he has my trust. I'd give him a look if you need a tight end for 1 week, or if your starter isn't reliable and you're looking for a change. Jimmy Graham is a very easy option to go get on your teams. Like I said, today's episode was going to be a little bit shorter than usual. I have a lot of trade stuff I'm prepping for you guys later in the week, as I mentioned before. Let me guys know if you like these shorter and more direct style fantasy videos. I appreciate all of your feedback and comments down below, so let me know. I'll see you guys tomorrow for my trade info and all that stuff that I'm going to be getting into this week. I've got a lot of good stuff for you guys, and I think it can really push you over the edge the rest of the fantasy season and help you make a run at the postseason. So, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every single one of you guys that stops by here on the channel and watches and supports my content, and especially you guys who go down and subscribe as well. So, thank you all, regardless of how you contribute to this channel. It's really appreciated, and I can't say enough how much it means to me. With that being said, I will see you guys later in the next episode. Until next time, peace out.